Welcome to Salt City Hoops on this fine Thursday evening. I suppose all of you will be listening on some other day other than Thursday in the middle of the night. I'm Mark Russell Pereira, here to talk to you about what we have for an interesting Jazz season that we have unfolding. The Jazz 1-7 as we sit here, just finished off a loss to the Milwaukee Bucks, and we want to make sure here at Salt City Hoops to give you a little update on how they're doing, what the young guys are doing, what the game, maybe not granular game recaps, but just kind of telling the story of the arc of the season, some key stats for each of the players that are worth talking about, maybe some larger thoughts as we get into the rest of this season. We're under 10% of the way through the season. This season will both be a long slog of a season where there will be several games where you will turn it off or not watch at all, perhaps. But there will be lots of times where it feels like a few weeks will fly by, and you're like, well, I have no idea what has happened in these past few weeks. I've been busy. We've had holidays. I really don't know what is happening with the young players, and that's why we want to try to at least do a few check-ins throughout the season and get some stuff in your ears to talk about the Utah Jazz. And even if they might not be the most exciting product on the court, we all know that the trajectory of this team is interesting to talk about. Even if you're not watching, you almost want to sim to the end of the season and see what's happening next year. But the micro developments that happen in the season and the minutes distribution, that sort of thing, is, I think, worth talking about at stages throughout the season. So let's get right to it. Again, Mark Pereira, glad to have you here this week. Tough week for a lot of folks in the world, the United States, and everything like that, but we can at least rely on the things that give us joy and things to talk about in our hobbies. So always rely on your hobbies and your communities and do good for your neighbors. So let's talk about the games that we've had so far. This team is trying to lose as many games as possible, right? Well, game one was kind of a scare for Utah if you're on the extreme tank wagon. They had a very close game against Memphis, and it's exactly the type of game you want. An extremely close competitive game with successful performances all around for the Utah Jazz young players that culminated in a close loss. So you get the correct win-loss column, but you have things to take away. With no Jaren Jackson Jr. for Memphis in this game, I think the most impactful thing that came out of this game is Walker Kessler causing Zach Edey to foul out in 15 minutes. So Walker Kessler absolutely looking dominant out there. And we'll get into maybe more of a broader recap on how all these guys have been doing, all the young players for sure, and the key mainstays of what we're looking for the Jazz future. We'll talk about them as kind of overall thing. But as I'm going to do these very brief recaps, we'll give you a little flavor of what these guys have been doing. Walker Kessler's been great in the beginning of the season, and he really started out with a bang here. You have a situation where Santi Aldama is going to hit 5 threes, and not everyone is perfect for the Jazz, and Memphis is going to get the close win there. Lauri started off his season strong, going 35-9, and he had 4 threes and 14 free throw attempts, but Memphis was just a better team, and Jazz didn't have as many horses, but Keyonte George, what will be a theme throughout a lot of what our discussion is, he shot 3 for 18 in this game, went 5-9 from the free throw line, and Cody Williams, first draft pick of the Jazz in this past summer, he had 0 field goal attempts, which is one thing we will be closely monitoring, as well as his aggression, his ability to get on the floor. The close games played by Utah ended in game 2. Like I said at the outset, this team is 1-7, and we're going to start off with 6 straight losses before winning at Chicago a couple nights ago and lost against Milwaukee tonight. So they're 1-7, but they started out with 6 straight losses, and most of them weren't close. This game against Golden State over in the third quarter, and what is also going to be a tiny theme, Lauri Markkanen was 4 of 17 and entirely unproductive, and I'll get more into what I've been noticing about his game in a little bit. Second game in a row was very odd that it seemed like Colin Sexton was only playing about 20 to 25 minutes, and Patty Mills, who I loudly proclaimed was never going to play for this team unless they absolutely needed, He was playing 15 to 20 minutes throughout this first stretch of the season. He played a lot tonight. Isaiah Collier was playing over Patty Mills in preseason, and Collier notably has been out with a hamstring strain this entire first set of the season. We'll get into him in a minute. Patty Mills didn't necessarily play over Isaiah Collier today in the Milwaukee Bucks game. I'll save my discussion for that in a bit when we get to talk about rookies playing, young players playing just for minutes' sake. But I think the issue that I have with Patty Mills playing so many minutes in this early stretch is actually taking minutes away from Colin Sexton, because there's still a mystery box that needs to be explored with Colin Sexton. You need to be able to find out this season if Colin Sexton is worth a guy that you want to consider a next contract for, or if you need to consider what a trade looks like. And perhaps keeping him as a mystery box helps his trade value, right? If he's playing more and takes more of a responsibility, as we saw in Cleveland in his very early years, he might put up numbers, but it belies perhaps not as productive as a player as you might think. So, look, you need to save Colin perhaps for the whole season. This is going to be a losing season, but you also need to... I'm not sure what value you're getting out of playing Patty Mills over Sexton so much. Sexton isn't a first-year player or second-year player. This is still a player that is worth having to on the floor to be around young players and help run an offense and be productive on the floor and be a positive asset, whereas Patty Mills is just... not just Patty Mills' veteran presence. Patty Mills has been actively bad for a couple years now, and not just a couple years. I think Patty Mills hasn't had a positive performance year in like 3 years now. His last hurrah was that Team Australia maybe a couple summers ago. He didn't look great in this past Olympics. And another thing that I have an issue of this Sexton Mills thing is, yeah, Sexton's not a pure point guard, perhaps. He's a good playing the one type of guy, but maybe not capital P point guard. But he definitely has some distribution chops. He's a guy you trust to say, hey, if he's our point guard, maybe we need some other passing chops throughout our lineup here, but he has enough. He is a point guard. Patty Mills, I think, based on his size, I think he's always been miscast by the regular fan as like, oh, clearly he's a point guard. Patty Mills is also a score first, dribble the air out of basketball kind of guy. Growing, kind of getting through the San Antonio system a little bit. He definitely played some amazing team basketball, and he can pass, and he plays well in a well-orchestrated team system. But this guy is not high on the assists per game or assists per 36 minutes type of guy. This is a guy who likes to shoot the basketball, and now he's never had size. He's diminutive. Now he can't get his shot off. He's in a bad team environment, and Patty Mills is actively hurting this team. And sure, maybe the fan in you saying, like, good, I want this team to lose games. But as a coach and as a lineup, when you talk about the players who deserve to be out there, right now Patty Mills, the only reason he deserves to be out there is because he's played 1,000 years in the league, not because he's actually helping the team. And if he's going to be bad and hurt the rest of the roster with bad shot selection, frankly, Mills is not, just because of his genial personality and his winning background, he's the only player on the Jazz to win a title, believe it or not. I think the Jazz have the second lowest percentage of players playing minutes on them who have won an NBA championship in the entire NBA, which you're like, oh, of course not. They have a bunch of young guys. But I was surprised that they had anybody, and it was Patty Mills. And again, the reason that was surprising, because we really didn't think Patty Mills was going to be playing any minutes. I think that Utah should be 30th on that list. If you're going to have players out there who are hurting the performance of the team, you might as well just have it be Sexton or have Keyonte be playing 35 minutes. Obviously, when Collier gets healthier, we might think we'll see a different distribution of those minutes. But it was just really disheartening to see in Game 1 and Game 2, Colin Sexton only playing 20-25 minutes. And that persisted in Game 3, Game 4. It really wasn't until the Game 6 win against the Chicago Bulls that we saw Colin Sexton playing 35 minutes, right? Like, Utah really went out and tried to win that game. So, would love to see more Sexton as we go forward here. Colin Sexton tonight was like around like 27 or 28 minutes, I think. 27 minutes for Sexton and 16 for Patty Mills. Again, that's just way too much Patty Mills. 25 minutes for Keyonte George. There's just no reason for 16 minutes to be in Patty Mills here. If you're going to have Patty Mills, it should be 8 minutes, right? Like 4 in the first half, 4 in the second half. This is way too much discussion about Patty Mills. I apologize. Another loss against the Mavericks in Game 3, but it was close throughout most of the game. And I thought the defense against Luka Doncic by all players, especially Cody Williams and Taylor Hendricks, was terrific. Unfortunately, Taylor Hendricks did suffer a catastrophic broken leg and dislocated ankle in this game. One of those horrible injuries that it's disgusting to watch, right? So immediately horrifying. He's out for the year. Hopefully he gets better. I'll talk about Taylor Hendricks real quickly right now. He only played in 3 games, 2.5 plus games, right? His shot looks okay, but what the ball wasn't going in the basket. But just, when it comes to shooting and his role on the team, that's just impossibly low sample size to assess. However, we were immediately able to see that this guy was an impactful defender. He looks huge out there. Last year he looked skinny, not with it. He's one of the very few examples that I've seen where a team will say, oh yeah, this guy put on 15, 20, 30 pounds of muscle in the summer. They said he put on 23, 24 pounds of muscle in the summer or whatever, and it looks like it. Usually, okay, it doesn't, the guys doesn't really look that much different. Hendricks looked huge out there. His core looked strong. He wasn't being moved off his spot, but he was still agile. I loved his defense against Doncic in this game, I recall. And it's a shame we'll lose him for the season because it really does kind of muck up the rest of the rotation too. Perhaps we get more minutes for John Collins, which is nobody's favorite thing, but maybe it keeps John Collins a little less pissed off as he's coming off the bench, which, again, you need people to be happy so that if everyone's pissed off by December, January, right, it ruins the spirit of young players to work hard, and if they're playing alongside veterans who don't give a shit and aren't trying, that hurts their ability to learn how to play NBA basketball. I'm not saying every game has to be competitive, but every single game the team has to go out there with a reasonable chance of like trying to win, so they understand, so that young players learn, oh, this is what a winning basketball environment requires me. This is how I make this read. This is where this guy is going to be open. If I'm defending in this situation, this is what I should look out for. But if you got 3 of the 5 players on the floor who just like actively going through the motions and collecting a paycheck, those young players are learning nothing, right? So you need to have some sort of veteran presence on the team, and so we need to kind of keep John Collins a little placated if he's coming off the bench, even if he doesn't want to. 4th game against the Kings in what is a trend early in the season. The third quarter absolutely just blasted this team. A young player watch for this is Markkanen left with back spasms, and Kyle Filipowski immediately played 25 minutes, and he held his own against Sabonis. I thought that was pretty cool. And Keyonte George is still shooting terribly at this point in the season, 3 of 13. And Sexton and Mills played the same amount of minutes in this game. It was absolutely maddening. 5th game against the Spurs. This is the first game without any Lauri Markkanen. Throw the game in the garbage. Just nothing worth watching. Keyonte George had 7 turnovers. Walker Kessler was 3 of 9 in this game. He's, like I said, he's been pretty terrific all year, but completely outclassed by Wembanyama. He just didn't even seem like they should be on the same court. Completely outclassed by the Spurs. Completely outclassed in the 6th game against the Nuggets. First game of a road trip. That is also a game that just, as you're watching, you're like, this is not worth my time. And it's the 2nd game without Lauri Markkanen. You're realizing, like, yeah, if Markkanen's not out there, this team just doesn't know how to play basketball, right? Like, it's a key gravitational force that affects how the rest of the players on the court operate offensively and defensively. And Markkanen filling a pretty important spot there too. Just unimportant. And then the Jazz get their first win. Took seven games, but they win on the road against Chicago. And I mentioned Sexton finally getting like a full complement of minutes. It really, the star of this game was John Collins. He did come off the bench, but he played 34 minutes. He had something like 28 points, and he was a man on a mission, and he was really taking advantage of what is a horrible Chicago defense, right? Like, they lost Alex Caruso. They have no real front court defensive abilities. Vucevic isn't going to do the new backup center they have, and Jalen Smith is more... he's okay around the board and has some shooting ability, but not exactly the greatest defender. And Keyonte was efficient. Keyonte George didn't turn the ball over, and he was efficient. And I think these sorts of games are going to be few and far between for both John Collins and Keyonte. And sure enough, that's how they got the win. If you watched this game, you were treated yourself to 20-plus minutes from Talen Horton-Tucker. And in case you're freaking out, no, Talen Horton-Tucker plays for the Chicago Bulls now. So at least we didn't have to watch him in a Jazz uniform, and he looks just as terrible as he always has. But because he dribbles the basketball and can make a pass here or there, they give him 20 minutes. Zach LaVine didn't play in this game, but I just feel like there's other ball-handling opportunities that you could have on Chicago that you did, and Lonzo Ball was out. Lonzo Ball has made his return this season, which has been pretty cool, and he looks pretty okay. Probably can't give him a lot of minutes, but kind of like Sean Livingston, you almost wonder if like Lonzo Ball will find his way as like a 15-minute per game backup guard for some championship level team, and he's gonna break second units because of how good he is. And obviously the pinnacle of that archetype is a Bill Walton, right? Can't play a lot of minutes, but hey, he's willing to play second unit, 15 minutes a game, and completely break the game. And I like seeing Lonzo Ball out there. And here in Denver, we're actually I'm watching Lonzo Ball's recovery closely because Gabriel Landeskog, a star center for the Colorado Avalanche, is basically going through the exact same situation as Lonzo went through. So we want to see if Lonzo can kind of get on the court and see how he does. So great win for Utah against Chicago. And then this game against Milwaukee is, again, Markkanen, first game back, great. He went 3 of 10. Markkanen has been incredibly inefficient. I'll talk about that in a moment. Damian Lillard got whatever he wanted anywhere on the court. This wasn't Dame time hitting amazing deep threes and doing amazing moves and taking advantage of pretty good defense. There was just no one able to defend him, and we had absolutely zero people who could defend against Giannis's physicality. Walker Kessler had a pretty decent game defensively overall, but Giannis was absolutely murking up a lot of different Jazz defenders, and I thought Kessler did an okay job defending Giannis, and Giannis powered right through him. And I don't think there was anything wrong with what Kessler did, but Kessler was also not the only one who got powered through. There was one post-up where it was an intentional matchup of they had Cody Williams on Giannis after a very intentional switch, and Giannis posted up Cody Williams. He didn't put his back into the bat. He didn't put him into the goal. But Giannis did put up a quick little hook shot. It very quickly missed, and Giannis just pretended like Cody Williams wasn't even there, moved him out of the way, got the rebound, and had a putback dunk. Or maybe it wasn't a putback dunk, but it was a very quick offensive rebound slam. As if Cody Williams wasn't even there. And that's just a physical mismatch if there ever was one. I think Cody is surprisingly pretty good at his physical abilities for how slight he is, but I mean, this is Giannis Antetokounmpo. This isn't gonna go well for him. So that's our quick little check-in on the games that we had so far. Look, key takeaways that we'll go through. I think it's good to go player by player on this. I'll start with what I could consider like the two forward vets, which are the vets that we have as a Jazz fan to look forward to. That's Lauri Markkanen and Colin Sexton. Lauri Markkanen, I'm going to pull up these stats here in a second here. Yeah, so the Lauri Markkanen shooting 34% from 2. Now, he's played 4 games, maybe like 3.5 games. And these shooting numbers will all kind of normalize out. And he's shooting 45% from 3. So in this early stage, shooting better from 3 than from 2 is wild. But 34% from 2 is also a wild departure from what we're usually seeing out of Lauri Markkanen. 55, 56, 57, 58% from 2. Like, this is a very quality interior scorer, and he's not getting it. And 3-point percentage, like, yeah, he's shooting 45%, but he's only shooting 5 threes per game. Maybe that's depressed by 1 3 if he played the entirety of that game that he left due to back spasms. But he's not getting a shot off from 3 as much either. He's being run off the line or whatever and shooting these horrible contested 2s. There's a lot of things that we're noticing about Lauri Markkanen this year. One, we've talked a lot about in the summer that the thing that we want Lauri to improve upon is, even if we accept that he's never going to be the 1A alpha of a championship team, he needs to be able to do his own thing when called upon as this team grows and builds. And it's always terrifying to me when a very large player gets a smaller defender on him and can't do anything with it. And right now, Lauri Markkanen is unable to create space against smaller defenders on him. We're putting defenses are so far very confident in having smaller players guard Lauri Markkanen either after a switch or what have you. And early in the shot clock, Utah has historically, over the past few years, been very good at getting Lauri Markkanen a great shot attempt early in the shot clock if they have a mismatch. Usually that's something like Lauri Markkanen coming off a pin down or some sort of situation where early in the shot clock he gets a great shot. And even if the defense is close and it's a very tightly contested shot per tracking data or whatever, Lauri's so huge that if you're putting a smaller defender on him, it doesn't matter. His shooting is just that good. However, we're seeing a lot of, because the offense is not as fluid, as normal as you would hope to see, so you end up with these situations where the offensive action doesn't work at all, and then you end up with Lauri Markkanen getting the ball at the end of a shot clock. Now, this isn't a last 2 seconds of a shot clock situation, though. This is like, hey, the first action, 2 actions really didn't work. We didn't know what we're doing. So 8, 9, 10 seconds left on the shot clock. Let's just give it to Lauri Markkanen. And based on what Utah's done or how the defense has reacted, the defense has been totally fine with having a smaller player on Lauri Markkanen at the end of the shot clock. And if they're not fine with the smaller player, they've been sending double teams. And it's been very disheartening this season so far early that Markkanen has really struggled against those situations. He hasn't been able to put those smaller guys into the goal. He hasn't been able to drive to the basket. He's turning the ball over when he gets double teamed. And the reason he's shooting 34% from 3, or 34% from 2, which is incredibly abysmal. Like 34% from 2, everybody, would be preposterously low if I'm trying to think of an old terrible shooting point guard, right? Like 34% from 2 is untenable. Like that's not, you can't play in the NBA that way. Again, this is going to normalize to something, but if this historic 55, 56, 57% 2-point shooter becomes a 49% 2-point shooter, 52% 2-point shooter, even if it's above 50%, if it's not at that 55 level, now we're talking about kind of inefficient player. But if you've been watching these games, he's been shooting these tightly contested 22-foot like fadeaway 2s. He's been having to throw the grenade at the end of the shot clock, which, okay, look, those aren't always going to get in, but a lot of times these grenades at the very end of the shot clock, they start with him getting the ball with 5 or 6 seconds left. And look, I'm not a basketball player, I'm not a basketball coach. What my dumb advice would be as I'm watching this is make a move quicker. Be quicker on the decision, Lauri, because if you are able to act before the double team gets there, you can get an advantage. And he has enough dribble skill that I know he can at least get to the free throw line. He can get to the 9-foot, 10-foot area where you're putting yourself in a position to have a better shot. And he's big enough that floater isn't crazy. He's big enough that he can get offensive rebounds. Instead, he's kind of thinking too much. He's trying to back people down, but he's not backing them down well enough. And he's allowing double teams, or he's taking it too much to the end of the shot clock, and he's throwing up these prayers. So that's how you end up with what I think I've been very, very disappointed with Lauri's scoring, and just what he's doing with the basketball has been pretty disappointing. A lot of season left to play, and obviously we've talked a lot about his passing, right? Like, is there going to be some sort of play designs and things where he can show off his skills as a passer? He had one really nice pass today to the corner that ended up in a missed three. I forget everything about the details of that, but I wrote it in my notebook as Lauri had a great pass to the corner that was actually a pretty advanced level pass. So it was good seeing his familiarity on the court there. So we'll see what happens. By the way, 5 3-point attempts per game would be the lowest of his entire career, even going back to as a rookie. We know he's always been a good 3-point shooter. He's always had good volume of that. But if now he's having the lowest 3-point attempt rate of his career, that's unacceptable. We got to get him up. We got to put him in a position to shoot these shots. John Collins is turning it over all the time. I am not the biggest John Collins proponent. I was a huge fan of the trade. Maybe not a huge fan of the trade, but I love the idea of betting on talent. His contract is horrible, but his contract kind of fit with the timeline we were on, right? Of like, well, we can absorb that level of money over the next couple of years and see if we can reclaim what makes John Collins special. And instead, we're facing with this really gross situation for how he's playing basketball right now. He is isolating a little bit more. He's not acting as a play finisher as much as he has in his career, and he's turning the ball over. He's shooting more inefficiently, and I don't know how to describe his performance other than it feels like he's a man without a home, almost. He's been playing way more 4 this year, which looks more natural to me. It's whenever you cast him as a 5, it's almost John Collins at the 5 feels like a lineup that you want to do at the end of a game, where maybe you're trying to get some offensive juice and like this is your 5-man lineup that is going to work. You don't need your center in for whatever reason. Maybe that's credible to me. But as a regular 5, he looks so skinny and so small out there. Despite his rebounding acumen, he's always getting destroyed as a defender. Even if he can clean up the boards really well at his size, with his leaping acumen and his ability to read rebounds, guys like Giannis and, as we were seeing today, and Vucevic were just running right through him like he's not even there. And that is just so much of a problem. It's good that he's filling in the minutes. I talked about him a little bit earlier. I don't have a problem with him being out there, but we're simply not seeing the value of that trade. Like, we're not seeing a way where John Collins is improving, where we like having him around. You know, what's funny is, though, he's averaging the lowest minutes of his career, even going back to his rookie season. But he's averaging 16.6 points. He's averaging the most turnovers of his career. I mentioned that. But that's 16.6 points. Like, that's most than last year when he was playing more minutes. He played 20 minutes a game last year and scored 15.1 points per game. So he's scoring more in fewer minutes. I think coming off the bench is a good idea for him, by the way. I like the idea of getting 24 minutes seems right. 24 minutes off the bench for John Collins seems right to me. And you know, even when Lauri Markkanen was out, there was Lauri Markkanen and Taylor Hendricks were out. 2 forwards right in John Collins' space, right? No, we started Cody Williams and Kyle Filipowski, right? Which I think really does call to the youth movement that the Jazz are insisting on. So I think this is good to have John Collins coming off the bench, and it shows, at least to random other general managers across the NBA, like, this is a guy who can produce coming off the bench. He doesn't need to play 35 minutes to get 15 points per game. But 13.1 minutes in his last season in Atlanta, and he played 30 minutes a game there. 31 minutes per game the year before, and he averaged 16.2. So he's averaging the most points he has in 4 years. That doesn't mean it's more efficient, because he's shooting below 50% for the first time in his career. He's shooting 52%, 53% from the field, and he's always been around 60% plus from two. I'm sorry. He's averaging 53% from two, and he's always around 60% from two. So he, as well, has been horribly inefficient from two. Some of the stuff will normalize out, but if you're watching these games, he and Markkanen are constantly taking these preposterously contested mid-range shots. And I could pull up this data live, but I don't immediately have it in front of me. But as I watch these games, it just seems a lot of contested mid-rangers from our forwards, and that's going to drag down your percentages. 36% from three, that's fine. He's taking 3 of them a game. It's entirely acceptable. He shot an acceptable percentage from three last year, but he also needs to finish. He needs to finish these 2-point shots, or it's going to be more inefficient. So he's jacking up 13 shots per game in way fewer minutes than he's ever played. It's an incredible. It's like he gets off the bench and he's ready. He wants to shoot because he's antsy. But this season is not nearly about John Collins, right? It's about all our other young guys. And we have to start the young guy discussion with Keyonte George. I did skip over Colin Sexton for a minute, but maybe I'll come back to him. Keyonte George, his shooting has been absolutely dreadful. He's shooting 39% on twos, which, as I mentioned before, it would be absolutely dreadful. One of the worst marks in the league. 6th percentile according to Cleaning the Glass. 30% from three, which is very bad, right? It's not preposterously like, oh my god, run and hide. And it's his made baskets are assisted, which is really funny. When he is making baskets, it's because they're always a result of a good pass from and he's shooting from three or something like that. It's whenever Keyonte George is isolating or at least taking a few dribbles, it's incredible how often he is missing open shots, even just because he has started the possession as like an isolation play or coming off of something where he, even if it's not pure isolation, something where he's dribbling a couple times, driving to the basket or whatever. He's had a couple games where he has drawn a lot of free throws. We noticed in Summer League and in preseason, really was impressed at his ability to draw free throws. And it wasn't the result of the bullshit Trae Young style Austin Reeves drawing free throws. Like, he was in inviting contact, getting shot attempts up even through the contact, and we haven't seen it as consistently from him, and we've seen a lot of turnovers as well. So would like to see more from Keyonte George as we go forward here. A lot of people are freaking out about George. Oh my god, he can't shoot. This is horrible. He shouldn't be a starting point guard. What are we doing here? Is he a bust already? He had all this promise last year, but he hasn't really improved. I think it's just way, way, way too early for that. We saw let me just compare it to Talen Horton-Tucker last year. We had 10 games of a lot of Talen Horton-Tucker starting early in the season, and the types of mistakes Talen Horton-Tucker was doing was just like, this guy shouldn't be on the floor. It was those types of preposterous mistakes. And he had never shown an ability to shoot a high percentage from three. And he had a few more seasons in the league. Whereas Keyonte, we have seen so many games so far where he has shot really well. He's able to get a ton of space. I think that's also really important, is that he has good shake. He's getting good shots off. And his turnovers are extremely silly and stupid, but How much of that is a learning point guard? How much of that is the team environment around him? And if you look at the other ball handling options on the team, I don't know. I think he might be the second best guard on the team, or in general, right? There aren't exactly a ton of other options out there either. So I am a little concerned with Keyonte because you don't want it to happen the entire season. But these dreadful shooting numbers are something to watch. I think it was decent today, if I recall. Five. I'm sorry, not today. It was the other. It was he had a fabulous game against the Bulls. I mentioned he and John Collins had great games, and he was 8 of 18 from the field and 11 of 13 from the free throw line, 6 of 12 from 3, which meant he was only 2 of 6 from 2, right? But again, drawing 11 of 13 from the free throw line, that means he's getting to the line on those 2-point attempts, maybe a couple 3-point attempts. I can't recall immediately. That's what you want. You want him in the paint. You want him doing these things in the paint or shooting threes, not turning the ball over a lot. Long ways to go for him, though. We want to string together these efficient games, game after game, and it just really, really, really hasn't happened yet. If Keyonte is making buckets right now, it's because Colin Sexton is setting him up, or it's some other situation. He's frankly just missing all of the shots, whether they're assisted or not. So it just seems to be, and that makes sense, right? Every player is going to shoot a little bit better if it's from a decent pass being delivered to them. But we do, for someone like Keyonte, you need him to have a good percentage of his non-assisted buckets going in the basket, and they're just super not right now. Something to watch. We'll catch up at next week, see how he's doing on that. Mentioned Taylor Hendricks, looked wonderful defensively so far. Hopefully we get something great back from him. Isaiah Collier, one of the things I was immediately frustrated today is we heard that Collier was active for the game, but we still saw Patty Mills play a bajillion minutes. We saw Jordan Clarkson play he played like 13 minutes in a row or something in the first half. He was lighting the flame, Jordan Clarkson was, so it was worth kind of keeping him out there and seeing what would happen, but it was a little frustrating to see Clarkson and Mills playing so many minutes with Collier not getting on the floor, especially because Collier was ahead of Patty Mills in the depth chart, I think, in preseason. And there was a specific note made from Will Hardy that Collier and Jordan Clarkson made a good pairing because Collier is somebody who does have a penchant to get off the ball. Like, Collier moves the basketball. He is a capital P point guard, and maybe the environment at USC last year wasn't exactly inviting to show off a lot of his natural play running ability, which I think is really important and already a defining characteristic of the kind of player that Collier might become. But pairing him with Clarkson made sense, with Clarkson's penchant to maybe not pass the ball so much. But we didn't see Collier today. And thank you to Sarah Todd and Andy Larson, who asked Will Hardy about a postgame, and Will Hardy was very blunt. Collier's had one practice with us, and he gave Sarah a dirty look. Right? So maybe we'll see more Collier as the season goes on, or as the next week or two goes on. But I think it's entirely fair for a coach to say, if I'm going to go in here every game trying to win it, then I'm not exactly going to throw a rookie point guard who hasn't practiced with us all season to play 18 minutes. Collier got out there in garbage time. But with how badly Patty Mills is playing, I can't imagine Collier being that much worse. But you also don't want to put him in a horrible environment and that sort of thing. So we'll see. Filipowski didn't play today. Drew Eubanks played over him. The long, extended conversation by Will Hardy after the game of why that was. Now, Filipowski started when Lauri Markkanen wasn't here, so why is he on the bench? And sometimes this is going to get into the larger conversation now, I suppose. Development for young players happens in a lot of different ways, and none of them are guaranteed, even if you do everything right. The densest way to think about this is perhaps to make a cross-sport corollary here, is the rookie quarterback, the star rookie quarterback. And we frequently see rookie quarterbacks have great careers if they're able to come in to a team situation that it makes it easy for them, right? Like there's a great receiver, there's a great offensive line, you got great coaching staff. Defense is putting you in position to succeed, so you're kind of always being put in scoring opportunities and looking good. That typically doesn't happen for young rookie quarterbacks because who's drafting the young rookie quarterbacks? The worst teams in the league, right? So in the NBA, you don't have a singular force perhaps as the young rookie quarterback, but when you have these star young players or potential star young players, just putting them out there in garbage lineups, in losing situations, doesn't necessarily improve their ability to play NBA basketball. I hinted at it earlier that if you're learning how to play at NBA speed and learn NBA actions and defend against NBA talent, you need the other four players on the court to have a really good presence and understanding of what their job is and how to do those things that you're trying to learn. And young players can learn that together. You could put 5 rookies on the floor and they'll lose 82 games, but they might actually learn something along the way, playing together. Hey, this is what you're good at. This is what I'm good at. We'll complement each other. We'll work it as we go along. Coaching staff is huge as part of that, right? Like, even if a player is struggling and not understanding things and you're losing games, how does a coach connect with that player to improve their ability to understand the game despite the losing circumstances? But when we're 8 games into the season. So it makes sense to me that with Hendricks and Markkanen out, putting Filipowski in a starting lineup with the NBA talent who understands how to play, with Walker Kessler, Colin Sexton, Keyonte George, and the other rookie, Cody Williams, it's for each of Cody and Kyle, it kind of makes sense. Like, hey, you have very specific roles to handle tonight. We're going to bring John Collins off the bench. He's going to provide the forward scoring, and he might even finish a game, which is what he did in Chicago. But it doesn't make sense all the time, especially a game like tonight. You got Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, extremely veteran, powerful players that, hey, those 12 to 15 backup center minutes, Drew Eubanks is a better player to have in those lineups to help Cody Williams, to help Keyonte George. Development is not going to happen all at the same time for all these players. It's not linear. It's not like NBA 2K where you do drills or whatever and you play games and you just kind of click up the attributes for them. And then all of a sudden in 3 years you have 5 All-Stars starting, right? Like, it's in fact more likely that these players will all bust than if 1 or 2 of them become stars. And Filipowski is going to play a lot this season. He's going to come in next season with a lot of good NBA experience. A game like tonight where you are trying to focus on, hey, what is the best players, the best way these guys are going to learn is when they're being put in winning environments. And if you go into the game and you have a game plan that says, hey, this is a great game for Drew Eubanks to be more physical, to match the physicality of Giannis and Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis. All very, very physical, very physical players. Brook and Giannis are also very imposing players as well. Like, this is probably not the greatest situation for Filipowski to shine. Now, I'm giving Hardy a little bit of benefit of the doubt there. Perhaps if Filipowski is out there, it's adding a whole lot of spacing, right? You bring out Walker Kessler, you put in Filipowski, and instead of Drew Eubanks, and maybe your defense is complete garbage, but your offense is doing some interesting things and is putting a lot of pressure on Milwaukee. In the third quarter, Milwaukee played Lillard and Antetokounmpo together for a way longer stretch than they did in the first half. That told me that they were trying to close the door on the game. And they were dominating offensively and defensively. So maybe there is some credit to, like, hey, Filipowski's probably not as good at Drew Eubanks at a lot of things, but there's things that he is better than. We saw Drew Eubanks airball a 3 today. Now, Kyle Filipowski came very close to airballing a 3 today. But on a team that's bereft of passing as well, have no positive passers for their position on the team. I emphasis for their position, right? Like, we don't have anybody that you say, oh, he's a terrific passer at the center position. Our point guards are borderline adequate for their position, right? Only Keyonte is one that you say, like, he might be above average for his position, but all pretty sketchy. Filipowski is the only guy on the team that you might say is a good passer for his position, but we really haven't seen in the NBA yet. So I there might have been a way for him to play, and guess what? Next game, Will Hardy said that, hey, next game he might play 20 minutes. That very well might be true. I mentioned Mills over Sexton. I mentioned Mills over Isaiah Collier. Unlike Drew Eubanks, I don't see any value to having Patty Mills on the floor, right? I think he's a great veteran presence in the locker room, and I don't mind it if the team has a couple injuries in the backcourt and he's doing some off-ball stuff for 8 minutes a game. But I just don't want to see 15 to 20 minutes of him. But understanding that Isaiah Collier was like, it was basically told to us that he wasn't going to play tonight because he hasn't really practiced with the team. That makes sense. I'm not going to get too upset about that. But you also think randomly, too, of, in the bubble when Quinn Snyder randomly started Juwan Morgan. It's not because Juwan Morgan was better than these other players, right? Didn't rocket him up the depth chart, perhaps. And I think referring to this team in any sort of way about a depth chart is incorrect. I think once you start using the words depth chart with the Utah Jazz, you're going down not the correct path. But when Juwan Morgan started that game in the bubble, it was not because he was better than the other options when we had a couple injuries. It was just more like his whatever skill set he had was a better fit for that lineup. And when I look at the Filipowski starting alongside Walker Kessler and with Keyonte George, like, he's providing like a version of Kelly Olynyk or Lauri Markkanen, right, as like a spacing big and that sort of thing. Who's maybe not a rim protector. He's a big guy who can pass a little bit, but he's not a rim protector yet. He's got some good size. We'll see what he becomes. Coming off the bench and playing alongside John Collins and the other bench professionals, Jordan Clarkson, Patty Mills, I just don't see how that's helping Filipowski's development, just having those guys dribble around and be shitty, right? Jordan Clarkson and John Collins trading off isolation possessions and usually missing. Who is that helping, right? Defensively, he's got nobody around who's a positive defender, and he's just getting dunked on by Giannis and other players all night. That's not helpful. It's not helpful. I will roll my eyes a little bit at Will Hardy saying something like, oh, minutes are earned. It's less about earning, and sometimes you have to say to your team, we're gonna try for a week to see what this guy can do. Johnny Juzang has been in the lineup more recently. Juzang's 3-point shooting is legit. He is an A-level 3-point shooter now. A thing to watch. If I don't get to talk about it, I'm talking about him now. I'll just mention it. Juzang his 3-point shooting is looking awfully cool. He's got height. He got clowned on defense a couple times today, but Milwaukee was smart, veteran, physical, tough matchup for Juzang today. But it's okay to suggest to your team, hey, we got rookies, second-year players. May not be a winning effort tonight, but we're going to, for a week, see what happens with Filipowski in this position. We're going to see what happens if we give Keyonte the keys for 35 minutes, right? We're going to see what happens if we bring Colin Sexton off the bench and put in Isaiah Collier. Just a random example. I think it's on the coach to convince this team that it's the correct path, like and having the long game in mind. That said, one thing that is that Hardy also said that I really believe is that the players all see each other in the locker room. They see each other at practice. And if you see a guy who doesn't have it, who is not worth it, already as a rookie, second-year player, they haven't figured it out yet. Getting minutes over your 8-year NBA career, it's so demoralizing and can be so ego-crushing that you become a toxic presence in the locker room. Should somebody like that have more control over himself? Sure, absolutely. Should the coaching staff be more in control of establishing that situation? Sure, absolutely. But I don't think people really appreciate how wired these athletes are, these professional athletes. It's not a question of like, oh, your ego and keeping your ego in check. A lot of it is just how you feel like you can perform and getting the chance to show what you can do tomorrow. And if you have players playing over you who have not shown it in practice, who have not shown it in a game, and their locker room presence hasn't commanded like respect yet because they're young players, it's a natural thing to not then perform your best when you are called upon as a veteran player. So I think there is some credence to, all right, these guys have to quote unquote earn their minutes. But when you have, Danny Ainge and Justin Zenik have done a great job taking clubs out of Will Hardy's bag, right? He no longer can choose between a 7-iron, a 9-iron, an 8-iron for a shot, right? You got a driver, that's Lauri Markkanen. You got a shaky putter in Colin Sexton, and a couple wonky clubs in between, all in the middle, right? And sometimes you got to just play with what you have, and sometimes what you have is Kyle Filipowski starting. I'm just not going to be up in arms with Drew Eubanks playing one random game, guys, against the Milwaukee Bucks over Kyle Filipowski in a situation where if Filipowski was playing, I don't necessarily think it would have been a winning situation for him. Like the Patty Mills over Colin Sexton thing, this has become a 7-8 game stretch of this, so I'm complaining about it. If this becomes 8, 9, 10 games of Eubanks playing 15 minutes and Filipowski not playing, I think we'll be a little bit more annoyed. Part of the reason we're annoyed, too, is that Filipowski looked pretty good in his fill-in places. He is an NBA player. How good of an NBA player remains wildly left to be seen, but I could see him being a 10th, 12th man on an NBA roster forever, right? We'll see if he can improve from there to being a starter, to being a valuable bench piece. We'll see what happens. Mentioned Juzang, really like what we're seeing on him. Sense of ball, selfish isolation scorer. Haven't really seen much of anything from him that suggests, hey, wow, yeah, love what we're seeing there. And lastly, I just want to do our Jordan Clarkson check-in. You see him. He's if you're listening on the podcast, I have the Slam magazine of he and Lauri Markkanen behind me. I love Jordan Clarkson. He's shooting 20% on threes. He had a little bit of a flamethrower moment today against Milwaukee. His first flamethrower moment of the season, really. But the main issue for Jordan Clarkson is he's wildly ineffective in the paint. I'm saying ineffective and not inefficient because, yes, he's not shooting very well, but he always had a guile and a specifically athleticism to get these wonderful layups after dribbling 1,000 times because it was quick twitch feints and getting defenders off balance and getting a way to get a floater that was entirely uncontested. All of Jordan Clarkson's shots in the paint now are wildly contested. He cannot get open in the paint at all. He has no shake in the paint, and it's becoming a huge, huge problem because not only is he inefficient on his shots, the reason I said ineffective is one of the things that was so great about his first season kind of becoming this new passer or whatever is that that was a couple years ago, is that he still had that athleticism and that lift and that shake where if he wanted to look at opportunities to pass, the vision in front of him wasn't clouded, right? He didn't have a defender in his grill. He could make an easy pass to the corner. He can make he got really good at making interior passes. But if he's getting no shake and no space in the interior, he's not making those passes either. So he's not passing. He's turning it over all the time. He can't shoot from 2, and now he's shooting 20% from 3. He is our tank commander, and I hope he finds peace in life because I really like watching him play in general. This is going to be an interesting season. Long story. Oh, and Cody Williams. I haven't talked about Cody, I don't think. I think he'll be who we conclude with, because I wanted to mention like kind of our overall outlook of the season, because the Jazz these guys are gonna play a lot. I'm so sad that we're not getting Taylor Hendricks for the rest of the season, because he was off to a good defensive start, and you want to see like, all right, what do we have out of him? And it really affects your team building plans if like it's going to be next year, you don't know what you have out of him, and next year might even just be like a rehab year anyway, where he's going to be active and playing but still behind the development curve. Jazz play the Spurs, Suns, Mavericks, and Kings next, so we'll see. Let's start off with 3 p.m. Mountain against the Spurs on Saturday in San Antonio. So interesting day game. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with whatever college football you're interested in. But Cody Williams didn't take a field goal attempt in his first game. Definitely a big criticism of his at Colorado, right, is that he could be passive at times. And there were other quality players on that team, right, like Tristan Da Silva, and they had a point guard who got drafted in the second round this year too. Like there were other players to shoot and dribble the basketball and everything, but he still could be weirdly passive. But what we've seen from Cody Williams, even going back to preseason, we're tasking Cody Williams with guarding the opponent's best ball handler. He's been guarding John Morant, Chris Paul. He guarded Damian Lillard a lot today. And what I was disappointed with the game plan today, by the way, is Utah was switching everything with Damian Lillard. And that's a wise strategy, because in general, if you're not switching, Damian Lillard can just light you up from 3, right? You set a screen. As you're chasing him around a screen, he's either drawing a foul or he's just getting a wide open 3. In fact, he did draw a foul on a 3-pointer today, and I think it was Cody Williams guarding him. But I'm not trying to win the game in this when I'm saying this. I'm saying that I want Cody Williams to get as many reps as possible getting around screens, because I think he does have an uncanny ability with his slight frame to be such a pest and such a problem to screen. Like, yeah, he might be slighter. It might be easier to set up like the big, mean brick wall screen on him, but he's got such great fast twitch athleticism that I could see him learning how to go under screens and still be able to contest threes, because he's so fast and lithe. I want to see him kind of test that out instead of just being like, oh, well, we're switching, right? Switching doesn't test an individual defender's ability to learn defense, and so that's why I was frustrated today. But he's had some wonderful, wonderful moments defensively as a one-on-one defender. He locked up Luka Doncic more than once, and Doncic is a guy that if you played him in a 7-game series, he would figure out Cody Williams by the third quarter, right? Like, it's one game is not going to be something that you, like, oh, we have the Luka stop or whatever. No, Cody Williams just like he figured out his matchup and dominated, and he's been very good at keeping his guy in front of him most of the time. I think he has been caught by surprise on several ball handlers getting to the rim with ease against him, but in general, you can trust him out there. He's also always cutting when he's supposed to be. He's always I rarely see him make a defensive mental mistake of like, oh, that was my man, I should have done that, or well, there was one miscommunication with Lauri Markkanen today, but like sometimes these small miscommunications can happen. But in general, he's not losing his guy back door. He's paying attention. He's working hard. This screams so far, role player. He's shooting 9% from 3, by the way. But Cody Williams is shooting great at the rim. He has great finishing ability. He had a wild incredibly in control reverse layup attempt that just barely hung off the rim today. He's got very, very skilled finishing ability, and he should be a better shooter than he's shown so far. 9% is not a good start, though. 9% from three so far. But this all just screams 3-and-D role player, right? Like, would like you to be a little bit more impactful. We saw Patrick Williams, Chicago Bulls, the other night. He got a fat contract for being worse than three and not exactly the best defender. I'm saying worse from three as like a prospect. Like Patrick Williams is not somebody who's going to take a big volume or take a higher percentage of shots, and you hope that Cody Williams can be that sort of high volume 3-point shooter, at least in a tertiary role. And he got a boatload of money. A lot of people criticize that contract for Patrick Williams, but I don't want to get in a position 4 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever, where we're thinking about paying Cody Williams a truckload of money for being okay at threes and okay at defense. So the passivity concerns me so far, but we kind of knew that coming in. Want to see how he grows throughout the year, and his defense I think is promising. So that's where we're at. I want to do a quick rundown of those 8 games, quick rundown of the players that we got so far, and I think we'll try to do a weekly check-in and figure out the day that it makes sense for your ears to check in with me at Salt City Hoops. Always like to have a guest or two when we can, so this has been a long soliloquy for me. And that's all I got today. I'll sign you off quickly here. You guys can get to the rest of your weekend. Enjoy your November. And be good to your neighbors, friends. Life is hard. The world is hard. But if you're good to your kids, good to your spouses, good to your siblings, good to your neighbors, you can make your own life and their lives a little bit better day by day. Hey, I'm Mark. I'm Mark Pereira for Salt City Hoops. Catch me watching the Utah Jazz all season long, and hit me up on Blue Sky. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm aggressive. I've been aggressively posting on Blue Sky, on my channel, and I still kind of copy my posts over to Twitter just to as people start filtering over to Blue Sky. I encourage you to get on Blue Sky because we have the NBA community is like aggressively expanding into Blue Sky, and all of a sudden it's feeling a lot like Twitter 2012, where there's a lot of people watching and live posting about the NBA without the ads, without the blue checks and all that sort of stuff. So it took a while, but I think that community is growing pretty well. But yeah, I'm still posting some stuff on Twitter here and there. Have a good one. My name's Mark. Salt City Hoops. Have a good night.